Hello, Leafs fans, and welcome to the Babbling Buds podcast, hosted by Jordan Jacqueline.
Welcome to the 6th episode of the Babbling Buds podcast, hosted by yours truly, Jordan Jacqueline. A twice-a-week show covering the Toronto Maple Leafs and the NHL as a whole, bringing in a mix of various analytics and the eye test when discussing players and the team. I thank you for joining me today, and to make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes, follow us on Twitter at the Babbling Buds to stay up to date on all news surrounding the show. And it's a pleasure to announce today's guest, Caitlyn Atkinson, who has really emerged on Leafs Twitter lately, specifically over the postseason. Make sure to follow her Twitter at CSA Leafs. And my first question to you, Kate, is, are you supporting the Montreal Canadiens as they represent Canada's hope for the 2021 Stanley Cup?
That answer is most definitely no. I would rather see Boston win the cup.
Wow, that's a big take there.
Yeah.
And just to get some background info on that, the CN Tower Twitter account portrayed the entire GTA population last night by having their colors yesterday be lit red, blue, and white in support of the Canadiens. And Kate, I'm curious, as I've seen this discussion take place recently, what do you think of the narrative surrounding cheering for Canada's team? You know, once the other potential 6 teams are eliminated, do you ever find yourself cheering for the Habs, or did you cheer for the Sens in 2017, the Canucks in 2011 as Canada's team?
I think I might have had a little bit of sympathy for Ottawa. I think they had a good narrative back in 2017, but I've never fully cheered for a Canadian team just because they were Canadian. I think Canada's had such a long drought that I don't want to see the cup come back to Canada if it's not the Leafs. And I think it would be much more fun to watch them and both their drought and Canada's drought all in one go. And I'm fine with it staying in the States until then.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It would be something special if the Leafs were the team that really ended the drought there. And I don't really want it to be the Montreal Canadiens. Although I do find myself, I'll be honest, I do kind of support them a little bit. I kind of just want to see the Montreal-Boston Stanley Cup final. I don't know if I really want them to win or not. I just think, because considering you would never see a final like that again, I think it would be kind of like a once-in-a-lifetime experience there. But moving on, Joshua Cloak of The Athletic wrote his complete Maple Leafs prospect rankings, spring 2021 edition. His top 3 included Nick Robertson, Rodion Amirov, and Timothy Liljegren. Now, we do know Amirov will play in the KHL next season, but what do you make of Robertson and Liljegren, and do you believe that both could be full-time Leafs by next season?
I think I'd like to see that, or at least I'd like to see them get into the majority of the games. I've said before that the Leafs tried the win now strategy by bringing in older guys, veterans for the leadership. But I think if they're going to make this work long term and really create a culture where you can win beyond just 1 year, and especially in the regular season, you need to start bringing in the young guys and really fill out your team using your internal assets.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Liljegren's the interesting one for me just because Zach Bogosian was really rock solid on that third pair. But I don't know. I mean, his type of play style could age poorly even starting next season. And you kind of want Liljegren to be able to platoon with him more this season and see if he could really steal that spot from him. And honestly, Robertson, he was potentially going to be a full-time Leaf this year, right? So I'd be pretty shocked if he couldn't make the team next season. I think he could even potentially grab a top 6 role depending on how Alex Galchenyuk plays next season. So you have to hope this young talent can really emerge. And just one last rumor here, the off-season speculation really surrounding this team is getting into full swing. And an intriguing name that's being thrown around is Travis Connectkey. And most believe there's a fit here based off Chris Johnson's comments on Steve Dangle podcast. He alluded the type of player that he believes the Leafs will acquire, and Connectkey fit that description. Are you hoping the Leafs pursue this player in the offseason?
I like Connectkey's game. I think if you can get him without costing yourself too much in terms of cap assets, I'm not even sure. UFA or?
No, it'd be through a trade. But I think he's going to be a UFA soon, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. If he's not on a long-term deal, then you're worried about re-signing him. And in terms of getting up assets this year, the Leafs are losing quite a few players and will be losing more through the expansion draft. So I'm not sure what you're willing to part with in order to get him, especially if you're not willing to trade some of those young prospects, which I don't think they should be trading their top prospects at this point in time.
No, I agree with you there. They're in no position to be doing that. He's just an interesting player to me because, he kind of had somewhat of a down season compared to last year, having 34 points in 50 games, because he did have 61 points in 67 games the year before. He is a tenacious player and he brings an element that the team needs, but he also produces, which is the key word there. He can actually produce in a top 6 lineup and he would be fantastic. But the question is, what would you give up to get him? And, that's going to be a question with a lot of these guys the Leafs are apparently interested in as we head into the off season. And to end off the Leafs oriented discussion, I just wanted to ask you about your growth on Twitter over the past week. You ended up getting 2 tickets to Game 6 in Montreal and were one of the 2,500 fans in the building. Describe that whole experience. What made you purchase those tickets and the aftermath? And what was the aftermath really of it like as it gained traction on Twitter?
Well, I went to school in Montreal, so I've been living here for almost 5 years now. And I said sort of as soon as the Quebec government announced that they would have fans in the building if it went to Game 6, that I wanted to go. And I was very vocal about that in terms of everyone that's talked to me in my real life, on Twitter, etc. So when they did force Game 6, I just decided right then and there that if there were tickets available, I was going to get myself one and I was going to be at that game. And it was completely irrational and it was completely financially decimated.
That must have broke the bank, eh?
Definitely. I graduated a month ago. So you can imagine that as a recent university student, I don't have a ton of money floating around, but it was something that I really wanted to do. And I'm glad I went. It sucks that the outcome was what it was, but I had a ton of fun, and just being there, being in that environment was so exciting.
Yeah, what was your reaction as Jesperi Kotkaniemi scored the overtime winner there and you just realized you paid all that money just to see the Leafs blow it?
Honestly, I ran out of that building. We were sitting in a section of Habs fans, and
oh, wow.
I didn't want to deal with it. So I did. I'll admit that, I just ran. I wanted out of that building. I didn't want to be around for that celebration. But yeah, it definitely was upsetting that they couldn't pull through. And then, even more upsetting that they couldn't pull through in Game 7. But it's going to be an experience that I always remember. And just in terms of when you put it into perspective in terms of the world and stuff like that, not just a hockey perspective, it's really cool that I was able to be there. So definitely not anything that I'd ever regret. I might be a little bit more upset with the Leafs than the average fan, just given I paid a lot of money to watch them blow it.
You've earned that right, I would say, because that's just crazy. And I mean, maybe next year they'll do it for you if you get that chance again. But we're going to head into some general NHL news talk here. And we have to start off with Mark Scheifele as he addressed the media today. And it did not help his current reputation at all. And this tweet came from Murad Atiz of The Athletic. And this is what Scheifele really had to say to the media today. I thought I was going to be tried to be shut down by Philip Deneau. Instead, it was the Department of Player Safety that shut me down. This tweet currently has over 800 quote tweets, by the way, and people are they're just tearing it up. What do you make of this comment? And does it just reassure you that he believes he did nothing of consequence?
Yeah, I do think it speaks to the way the Department of Player Safety has handled these things in the past. And I think they're trying to enforce their policies more this postseason in some respects. So I get the surprise from Mark Scheifele because I think they have been a little more lackadaisical about those sorts of hits in the past. So I get that there's a little bit of surprise. That being said, if the rules are on paper and you break a rule, then there are consequences for that action. And I'm not quite on board with this take a whole week. He's had a whole week to process this, to, understand, to take accountability, and just still isn't. And I think that's kind of what needs to change, and will only start to change when DOPS starts enforcing these types of punishments more frequently.
No, I agree with you there. And it's interesting the narratives that came from this, how, necessarily the media aspect of it, and how, players aren't going to want to talk to the media and make quotes like this if we just continue to scrutinize them. But I do think it's a little bit more of a unique circumstance here. Like, this isn't somebody, trying to like shows his personality. This is somebody that's clearly, I'll just say it's whining to the media, right? Like, you don't really need to make that comment. You clearly, it seemed like as if you had shown remorse in that game. You clearly the following days afterwards really cared a lot. A lot of stuff was happening with his family too. It seemed like he had moved past it, but then this quote that surfacing, clearly shows, he doesn't necessarily agree there, and he's still continuing to whine about it. So very interesting stuff there. And we got to move on because according to Craig Morgan, PK Subban is joining ESPN as an NHL analyst for the remainder of these Stanley Cup playoffs. He is set to debut tonight on SportsCenter, and people really do believe he's going to be awesome at this. I am one of them. Do you think he will be a natural transition to TV?
Yeah, I think, speaking of players showing personality, I think he's been one of the best players in terms of, being vocal and, being vocal in his community, wherever that may be. I think he's kind of a really good face for the sport. And I think he'll do a fantastic job tonight. And I think having players that aren't in the postseason, but are current players on the media or during playoff games that they're not playing in, I think that's a really interesting move by the NHL.
Yeah, I'm surprised we don't see that more, and I'm hoping this is kind of like a trend, as ESPN and Turner Sports kind of get in here, because it's quite obvious they really want PK Subban to be a broadcaster when he retires, and why wouldn't you? I mean, this guy's clearly destined for it. He's going to be amazing at it, and figuring out any way to even just get him acclimated into that type of environment before he retires is nice, and I think we're going to see a lot of good stuff here coming from PK Subban. And now, in terms of actual hockey that's being played currently, the games are winding down. The Tampa Bay Lightning won Game 5 against the Carolina Hurricanes to take that series, and they advanced to their third semifinals appearance in the last 4 years. A stat I'll throw at you is they had a 62% expected goals for in that Game 5, and the score would have really been a lot worse had Nedeljkovic not been on the top of his game. And Vasilevsky, here's another interesting stat. Vasilevsky has clinched 3 straight wins with the shutout, and Braden Point scored the game-winning goal. Just a lot to break down here. What did you make of this series, considering the Canes did look good throughout those first 2 games, but just couldn't win?
I think, and I actually don't dislike Tampa's use of their cap space. I think, yes, there is obviously an advantage to having a $96 million roster in the postseason where you didn't in the regular season. That being said, if this sort of mechanism is available to all teams, then take advantage of it. I don't have an issue with what Tampa's doing, but I think it's been made very clear that they're a much better team in the postseason because of Nikita Kucherov. And I think, especially with Vasilevsky's performance and the idea that with the shutout in the last 3 clinching games, he plays much better under pressure. And I think that's why Tampa is so dangerous in terms of their offensive threat. They have the best goalie in the league, and they're pretty much unstoppable in that regard. And I don't know how you even begin to defeat them aside from their cap situation next year. They'll self-implode.
Well, they'll make it work somehow. They always do, and I mean, they always find players like Ross Colton, who actually scored the 2-0 goal there to really seal the deal that they were really going to win this game. And I just want to ask, here's another follow-up question: what do you make of Tampa's core compared to Toronto's core when it comes to building a team? Do you believe that Matthews, Tavares, Marner, and Nylander can kind of find that success that Stamkos, Kucherov, Point, and Hedman have found in this past 5-year run?
I think it's possible. I mean, you look at Tampa last year where they did go without their captain for the majority of their postseason run. I think Toronto's core is talented enough to do that. I think there's obviously differences in terms of how the money's allocated, because Toronto's core does take up more of the cap than Tampa's, but they need to learn to perform under pressure. And I don't know how you can teach that in the regular season when there really is no pressure, especially this regular season where they led the division for all but the first couple weeks. So I don't know how you impart that knowledge onto them. And it looks like Tampa's core was just, it looks like they just kind of had that inherent ability. So I think the talent's there for Toronto, but I don't know how you get them to perform when it really matters.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Obviously, there's a little bit of an age discrepancy too. Like Kucherov is a little bit older, Stamkos is a little bit older, but these guys have just been able to naturally find their ability. Like Braden Point has 21 goals, 42 points in his last 31 playoff games. Like he's literally everything Mitch Marner should be able to do, and he just can't at the moment. And you have to hope something changes there soon. Hopefully those killer instincts, as we've all been hearing these past weeks, can finally be found for this Toronto Maple Leafs team. And the last question, actually, because this is a little bit unrelated, but it is still kind of revolving the topic. The discourse surrounding the Canes Twitter account is intriguing to me, because a lot of people feel that some of their posts are forced. I remember when they were Dallas Star fan account last year, and they don't really have as good sense of humor as per se the New Jersey Devils Twitter account. And I just want to know what you make of those claims.
I think the Canes are trying. The Canes account doesn't annoy me as much as, say, Vegas's Twitter account does. It's an interesting marketing strategy in terms of trying to attract new fans, and I think brands do this a lot, where they try and personalize themselves. And in a market like Carolina, that makes a ton of sense. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting strategy, and I prefer that to the Leafs Twitter account, but the Leafs don't need to attract anyone else. They've got their fans and they'll be fine. But yeah, they could definitely, some of their tweets are ill received, I would say.
Well, they up to a few years ago, they really were a small market team. They couldn't necessarily even spend to the cap because of some of those reasons, but they've really been able to build a fan base, with their storm surge, and they've just been able to do everything well in that regard. So I think that effort is, turning into results, whether people like to, actually admit to that. But I will say I do like the New Jersey Devils Twitter account a lot. I would say they're probably the best in the league at the moment. They're pretty underrated too. So I hope as they continue to get good, we'll see some more emergence from that Twitter account. And we got another series to talk about, as the Vegas Golden Knights took Game 5 in overtime as Mark Stone fired a wrist shot past Philip Grubauer. They have won 3 straight games, and even though the Avalanche looked better in this one, they blew a 2-goal lead and are now 1 win away from elimination. I just want to know, do you believe Vegas will prevail, or is this Colorado team just too good to be defeated in this fashion?
I have to think that Colorado is the more talented team. That being said, Colorado only clinched the top seed in that division in the last game of the regular season. So it makes sense that this series is tight. I think Colorado's talented enough to win the next 2, but it doesn't surprise me that this series is going at least 6. And I'm going to go ahead and say it'll go 7, just because I don't see how it can't.
Yeah, up until Game 5, it was pretty surprising how untight those games were, especially the 8-1 win for Colorado in Game 1. But, Vegas is proving that they can find life here. And I mean, this is an interesting question as well. We know the winner of this series will have to play the Habs. And how do you see that shaking out? Will the Habs be dominated as some people expect, or will they put up a fight that most people, maybe don't expect?
Living in Montreal, I would really, really like it for either Vegas or Colorado to just decimate them. I'm incredibly tired of the Habs flags flying. That being said, credit where it's due. They've been able to put up a fight the entire postseason. That Winnipeg kind of didn't put up a fight, which is that's another issue. But I think Montreal is going to try very hard. I still don't think that they have the level of talent required to push a series with Vegas or Colorado beyond 5, maybe 6 games. But I would have said the same thing about the Habs facing the Leafs a month ago. So I could be totally wrong.
Yeah, we all could be totally wrong. And this is very reminiscent of the Ottawa-Pittsburgh series I find in 2017, no matter who they play. And if they do end up facing Vegas, I actually think that's a better matchup for them because I think Carey Price could steal that series. And if their stars can literally just continue to do what they're doing, I do think it will be interesting. I don't know if they can really win that because that would be, quite insane if they actually beat one of those teams or put all of that North Division stuff to rest. And that's kind of why I also wouldn't mind it being at least a close series, but it's just going to be an interesting end to this season here. And we do actually have one final series to discuss, and that's Boston versus New York, as the Islanders have a chance to eliminate the Bruins on home ice tonight at the time we are recording this. Kate, what do you make of this New York team? Is Barry Trotz just too much for a majority of NHL teams to play around? Is he he consistently gets the best results out of every player in this roster?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that's been made of, whether Lou Lamoriello is responsible for the Islanders' success. And I mean, insofar as bringing in Barry Trotz, perhaps he wouldn't have, anyways. I think Barry Trotz is really what's driven this team, and his ability to get people to perform above their potential, or at least to the fullest of their potential, is really incredible. The other side of that series is that I don't think the Bruins can count on Rask to save them a game. I don't think they can count on him to. I'm seeing very much Freddie Anderson in Game 7 of the last couple postseasons. So I don't know how you get out of this series, and if you do get out of this series, I don't know how you get through the next one. If they play at their best, like they did acquire Taylor Hall. I really like the trade deadline too, in acquiring Mike Riley. Like that, this is a deeper Bruins team than we've seen in years past. I also really love Craig Smith on that second line as well. Like they should be able to win this. And I know some Bruins fans I've seen on Twitter don't like to admit it, but Tuukka Rask could be better here. And I think he could have made a few key saves, especially on that Jordan Eberle goal that maybe would have been this 3-2 Bruins series lead, but sadly it will not be. And also maybe David Pastrnak probably should have not missed a complete wide open net, and maybe we would be having a completely different conversation. And you did actually mention this, but I kind of just want to talk about some of the narratives about Lou Lamoriello and whether he should have stayed with the Leafs, and some people believe he should have just stayed to sign the Big Four. It's interesting in that regard, but we all know what he did. He signed Nikita Zaitsev to a 7-year contract. I'm sure there would have been plenty more of those. What do you think of this? Because he's currently on the verge of having his 6th series win since leaving the Leafs. What do you make of these claims? I'm not a Lamoriello fan. I think he was probably what they needed for the first couple years of that rebuild, not the Zaitsev deal. I think he brought a level of discipline to the team that was probably needed, especially as they went through that whole rebuild. But I do think that teams that are built like Colorado or Colorado, Tampa, I think those kinds of teams are much better and they're perennially successful. And I think Dubas looks at those types of models more so than a Lou Lamoriello team. And I just don't see the point in relitigating the Lamoriello issue when this past year Dubas was taking the criticisms to bring in more grit, more depth, more building a team that is more similar to Lamoriello in that way. And it's failed. Like I don't see the usefulness in engaging in that, where I don't think Lamorello makes his team any better.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Like, say you replace Barry Trotz with a coach like John Hines, what is his roster performing like? I mean, this is the same GM, that actively decided to keep Leo Komarov. I mean, maybe he had to just keep him because of that contract, and he had to trade away Devon Tays for 2 second-round picks. Not looking good. And I mean, that the reason that isn't that bad is because Noah Dobson has been able to step into that lineup and actually look very well there. But I just wonder how it's going to look over the next 3 or 4 years for that Islanders team, and whether the results they're receiving are going to be consistent. Because obviously their goaltending's been amazing, like Vezina nominee worthy. I mean, Mitch Korn, their goaltender coach there, is just absolutely fantastic. It seems like the coaching staff is really carrying this team here, and I just wonder if that's sustainable over the long term. Because if it is, good for them. I mean, the way it's working out, I mean, I could only hope so as a Leafs fan that we could see that type of success very soon. And we're going to end this off, Kate, with 3 NHL predictions. I'm going to hand you a few true or false questions. We're going to start off with the first one. If Colorado can persevere and play the Montreal Canadiens, and this is a scenario where Nazem Kadri comes back, he will receive at least 1 fine or suspension. True or false?
True.
True. You think? Okay.
I think it's a fine. It's a fine. I think he gets a fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'll only be $5,000, right? So I'm sure it won't break the bank for him. And this is a little bit more interesting. The Leafs trade for Dougie Hamilton in the offseason. True or false? That's a big one going out right now.
I'd like to see it happen, so I'll say true.
True, yeah. I mean, obviously the context of that is Morgan Riley would be going the other way, which would be interesting. I mean, Morgan Riley, Jake Gardner, James Reimer, all on the same team would be quite a sight to see. And I mean, I love Dougie Hamilton, right? So if that's possible, I don't know necessarily how you would rework that, because I actually really, I've heard from Flames fans, TJ Brody is better on the right side than the left. So, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to trying him there, but we didn't see it at all this past season. Yeah. I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I would like to see Dougie Hamilton as a Leaf. And this will be the last one here. So we're going to go fast forward to game 1 of next season. It's 2021-22. After serving his 1-game suspension, Mark Scheifele will continue to whine and not take any accountability. True or false?
True. Absolutely. Yeah. I have no doubts on that one.
Yeah, I can already hear the quotes right now, but it's going to be interesting. And, with that, Kate, I think we're ready to wrap up the show. So I just want to say thank you for listening to the Babbling Buds podcast. And these episodes have really been great. And Kate was a great one in this one. Remember to follow her on her Twitter at CSA Leafs. There we go. And she's done a lot of great stuff recently. She's really popping off. So you got to give her a follow there. And just make sure to follow us on Twitter at the Babbling Buds. Once again, thanks for listening and watching, and we have babbled enough for today. Until next time. Hey guys, I just wanted to release a statement upon the murder of the Absal family in London. I know normally I wouldn't do stuff like this after a show, but this needs to be addressed, and this was a despicable act of Islamophobia, and action needs to be taken. Check in on your Muslim friends and family, as this has been a very difficult time for them. I cannot begin to know what is going through their heads or their minds, but I empathize with them, and I really hope our political leaders can form a tangible plan and not just throw empty words into the public eye. The key takeaway here is that if Islamophobia is real in Canada, it was real before this murder, and it is still real after. That needs to change. Thank you guys, and stay safe.